The Veltar homeworld burned under a purple sky. Commander HFY pressed his three-fingered hand against the observation deck window and watched his civilization die. Below him, cities that had stood for 10,000 years crumbled under the relentless assault of the Kethmori hunters. The crystalline beings moved through the streets like living nightmares. Their bodies reflected the flames around them, creating dancing patterns of light and shadow. Each step they took drained the life from everything nearby. Plants withered. Small animals collapsed. Even the stone buildings began to crack and crumble as the hunters passed. HFY had seen recordings of other worlds that faced the same fate. The Kethmori always followed the same pattern. First came the scouts mapping the target species and their weaknesses. Then came the announcement, a simple message broadcast across all frequencies. The hunt begins. After that, the real horror started. The Kethmori did not want to conquer. They did not need resources or territory. They hunted for the pure joy of causing fear. They fed on terror itself, growing stronger as their victims became more desperate. The longer a species ran, the more powerful their hunters became. "Sir, the evacuation ships are ready," said Lieutenant HFY, his aide and nephew. The young Veltar's normally blue skin had turned pale gray with fear. "We can still escape to the outer colonies." HFY shook his head slowly. "There is no escape, nephew. They will follow us there too. The Kethmori always complete their hunts." The commander had studied every recorded hunt in galactic history. The pattern never changed. First, the Kethmori would attack the homeworld, forcing the population to scatter across space. Then they would begin the real hunt, chasing survivors from planet to planet, system to system. Sometimes it took decades, sometimes centuries. But it always ended the same way, with extinction. The crystalline hunters below seemed to sense his gaze. One of them, larger than the others, looked up at the command center. Even from this distance, HFY could see its faceted eyes glowing with hunger. The creature raised one of its blade-like arms in what might have been a salute or a threat. "They know we're watching," whispered HFY. "Of course they do. They want us to watch. Fear tastes better when it's fresh." HFY turned away from the window and walked to his command station. The communication array was still functioning, though most of their long-range equipment had been destroyed in the first attack. He had one chance to send a message beyond their system before the hunters found them. "Sir, what are you doing?" HFY asked, sending a warning. The commander's fingers moved across the control panel, setting up a broad-spectrum transmission. "There's a new species on the galactic rim. The humans. The Kethmori have already marked them for the next hunt." HFY looked confused. "But sir, what can they do? No species has ever successfully resisted a hunt. The Galactic Accord has tried for thousands of years to find a way to stop the Kethmori. If the oldest and wisest civilizations in the galaxy cannot fight them, how can a primitive species like the humans hope to survive?" HFY paused in his work. It was a fair question. The humans had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their technology was centuries behind most galactic civilizations. Their military consisted of crude kinetic weapons and primitive energy shields. By all logical measures, they would be the easiest prey the Kethmori had ever hunted, but something about the human data files bothered him. Most species, when they achieved space travel, immediately sought contact with peaceful civilizations. They wanted to trade, to learn, to become part of the galactic community. The humans had done that too, but their first questions were always the same. "Who are your enemies? What threatens the peace? How do you defend yourselves?" Other species asked about art, philosophy, and science. Humans asked about war. Perhaps they cannot win, HFY admitted, but they deserve to know what's coming. Every species deserves that much. He finished programming the message and began recording. The words came slowly, each one measured and careful. This might be the last communication his people ever sent. "This is Commander HFY of the Veltar Defense Force. If you are receiving this transmission, our civilization is likely extinct. We are being hunted by the Kethmori, an ancient predator species that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia. They do not seek conquest or resources. They hunt for the pleasure of causing fear. The Kethmori have marked humanity as their next target. You have perhaps months, maybe years, before they begin their approach. Do not trust the Galactic Accord's advice to scatter and hide. 27 civilizations have tried that strategy. All 27 are now extinct. The hunters are not invincible, but they are patient and persistent. They feed on fear, growing stronger as their prey becomes more desperate. They have never faced a species that fought back effectively, because no species has ever been willing to pay the price required to truly resist them. Study the data files attached to this message. Learn everything you can about their methods, their weaknesses, their patterns. And remember, they expect you to run. They have built their entire hunting strategy around that expectation. Perhaps it is time someone did something unexpected. HFY paused the recording and looked out the window again. The fires were spreading faster now. The Kethmori had brought their feeding ships into orbit. Massive crystalline structures that harvested fear like farmers harvesting grain. His people's terror was being processed and consumed even as he watched. "Sir," HFY said urgently, "they're coming up the tower. We have maybe 10 minutes before they reach this level." The commander nodded and resumed recording. "I do not know if resistance is possible, but I know that surrender guarantees extinction. The choice is yours, humans. Run and die slowly or stand and die quickly. Perhaps there is a third option that no one has ever been brave enough or foolish enough to try. Good luck." He transmitted the message on all frequencies, using every bit of power left in their communication array. The signal would take weeks to reach human space, but it would get there. Whether the humans would listen or understand was another question entirely. "Commander," HFY pointed at the door. Strange shadows were moving in the corridor outside. Shadows that moved against the light, defying every law of physics. HFY drew his sidearm, knowing it was useless. Kethmori were nearly impossible to kill with conventional weapons. Their crystalline bodies could absorb tremendous amounts of energy and redirect it back at their attackers, but dying with a weapon in his hand felt better than dying empty-handed. The door dissolved, not melted or blown apart. It simply ceased to exist, as if reality had decided it was no longer necessary. 3 Kethmori flowed into the room like liquid crystal, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. "Fear," one of them said in a voice like breaking glass. "Fresh fear. Intelligent fear. Delicious." HFY raised his weapon but found he could not move his arm. The Kethmori's presence paralyzed him, flooding his mind with artificial terror. Beside him, HFY collapsed, overwhelmed by emotions too intense for his nervous system to process. "You sent a message," the lead hunter observed, "to the humans. How thoughtful of you to warn our next prey. It will make their fear so much more intense when we arrive." The creature moved closer, and HFY felt his life force being drained away. But in his last moments, he managed to smile. "You think warning them makes them easier prey?" he whispered. "But you don't understand humans at all." The Kethmori paused, tilting its crystalline head. "Explain." "Humans don't run from monsters," HFY said as darkness closed around him. "They hunt them." Captain Sarah Chen stood in the communication center of the exploration ship Endurance, staring at the alien message that had just finished playing. The recording was 3 weeks old by the time it reached human space, having traveled across dozens of star systems before arriving at their frontier monitoring station. "Play it again," she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the strange blue-skinned alien commander delivering his final warning. His words, translated by their linguistic computers, painted a picture of terror that made even the veteran crew members uncomfortable. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, the ship's communication officer, "this Commander HFY mentions data files. We've been analyzing them for the past 6 hours. The information is disturbing," Sarah nodded. She had read the preliminary reports. 27 extinct civilizations, all hunted to death by crystalline beings that fed on fear itself. And according to the aliens' warning, humanity was next on their list. "Any word from Earth Command?" she asked. "Admiral Torres wants to speak with you personally, ma'am. Secure channel, highest priority." Sarah made her way to her private quarters and activated the quantum communication link. Admiral Marcus Torres appeared on her screen, his weathered face showing the strain of the past few hours. Behind him, she could see the busy corridors of Earth Defense Command. "Captain," Torres said without preamble, "I assume you've reviewed the alien transmission?" "Yes, sir." "Have we been able to verify any of it?" "More than I'd like." Torres rubbed his temples. "We sent probe ships to 3 of the star systems mentioned in the data files. All 3 are dead. Not just the planets, the entire systems. No life signs, no energy signatures, nothing. It's like someone turned off the universe in those regions." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Sir, what are our orders?" "First, we need more information. The transmission mentioned Veltar refugees who might have escaped. We're tracking some unusual energy signatures in the Kepler 438 system. Take the Endurance and investigate. If you find survivors, bring them back to Earth immediately. And second? Torres was quiet for a long moment. Second, Captain, is that we start preparing for war. I know how that sounds. A species we've never met has declared us their next hunting target, and our response is to fight back. Every other civilization in the galaxy thinks we should run and hide. Maybe they're right. Maybe resistance is impossible. But, Sarah prompted. But I've been a soldier for 30 years, Captain. I've never seen a problem that couldn't be solved with the right combination of intelligence, determination, and superior firepower. These Kethmori might be ancient and powerful, but they're not gods. If they can be killed, we can find a way to kill them. The transmission cut out, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She had joined the Space Force to explore new worlds and make contact with alien civilizations. She had never expected her first real contact with aliens to be a death sentence. Captain, came Rodriguez's voice over the intercom. We're approaching the Kepler 438 system. Sensors are picking up some kind of artificial structure in orbit around the fourth planet. Sarah made her way to the bridge. On the main screen, she could see a strange, organic-looking ship drifting in space. Its hull was damaged in several places, and energy readings were almost non-existent. Life signs? She asked. Faint but present, reported Lieutenant Commander Park, the science officer. Whatever's in there is barely alive. Take us alongside. Prepare boarding teams. An hour later, Sarah found herself floating through the alien ship's darkened corridors. The atmosphere was breathable, though thick with the smell of fierce sweat and desperation. Emergency lighting flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on the walls. They found the survivors in what appeared to be a cargo hold. Dozen Veltar refugees, including several children. They were thin and weak, their blue skin pale from malnutrition and trauma. When they saw the humans, they cringed back in terror. Don't hurt us, one of them pleaded in broken English. We have nothing left to take. We're not here to hurt you, Sarah said gently. We received Commander Zephai's message. We want to help. The aliens looked at each other in confusion. One of them, slightly larger than the others, stepped forward. You are the humans, the ones the Kethmori marked for hunting? Yes, then you should be running. Why are you here? Because we need to understand what we're facing. The alien introduced himself as Dr. Velkan, a scientist who had been studying Kethmori hunting patterns for decades. As they traveled back to Earth, he shared everything he knew about humanity's future predators. The Kethmori are not like other species, he explained, as they sat in the Endurance's medical bay. They are crystalline beings, silicon-based rather than carbon-based like most life. Their bodies can absorb and redirect energy, making them very difficult to damage with conventional weapons. But they can be killed? Sarah asked. Theoretically, yes, but the problem is not their physical form. The problem is their psychology. They hunt because they enjoy it. They feed on fear because it makes them stronger. And they are patient. Some hunts have lasted for centuries. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Endurance's xenobiologist, looked up from her notes. You said they follow patterns. What kind of patterns? Always the same, Velkan replied. First, they send scouts to study the target species. Then they attack the homeworld to create initial terror and force the population to scatter. After that comes the real hunt, chasing survivors across space, feeding on their growing desperation. How long do we have? Sarah asked. Their scouts are probably already in your system. The main hunting fleet will arrive within 1 to 3 years, depending on how interesting they find your species. 2 weeks later, they arrived at Earth. The planet looked the same as always, blue and green and beautiful, with thousands of ships moving between the surface and the orbital stations. But now Sarah knew that somewhere in that traffic, crystalline predators were watching and planning. The debriefing session at Earth Defense Command lasted for 18 hours. Admiral Torres, President Williams, and representatives from every major nation listened as Velkan explained the hopelessness of their situation. No species has ever successfully resisted a Kethmori hunt, he said for the 10th time. The strongest military forces in the galaxy have tried and failed. Your best option is to scatter your population across as many worlds as possible, and hope some groups remain hidden long enough to rebuild. And how many species have survived using that strategy? Admiral Torres asked. None, Velkan admitted. But some have lasted longer than others. Unacceptable, President Williams declared. We will not abandon Earth. We will not scatter like frightened animals. If these creatures want to hunt us, they're going to discover that humans hunt back. The alien refugees looked at the human leaders with a mixture of admiration and pity. They had seen this defiance before in the final days of their own civilization. It always ended the same way. But as Sarah watched Dr. Vasquez analyzing Keth Mori biological data with an intensity that bordered on obsession, she began to wonder if the aliens were wrong. Every species they had encountered so far accepted the hunt as inevitable. They ran because running was the logical response to an overwhelming threat. Humans, however, had never been particularly logical when it came to threats. "Doctor," Sarah said, approaching Vasquez after the briefing, "what do you think?" "I think," Vasquez replied without looking up from her microscope, "that these Keth Mori have been hunting prey for so long, they've forgotten what it's like to face predators." "You have a plan?" "I have questions. Very specific questions about crystalline biology, energy absorption patterns, and predator-prey psychology." "And, Captain?" "Yes? I think we're about to give them some very interesting answers." The first Keth Mori scout ship was detected 3 months later by the Deep Space Monitoring Station at Pluto. The crystalline vessel moved with an arrogance that suggested its occupants had never considered the possibility of being spotted by their intended prey. "Contact confirmed," reported Commander Lisa Park from the monitoring station. "Single vessel, approximately 2 kilometers in length. It's not hiding, Admiral. They want us to know they're here." Admiral Torres stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Dr. Vasquez's months of research had paid off. They understood the Keth Mori psychology now. The hunters always announced their presence to maximize fear in their prey. "Begin Operation Mousetrap," Torres ordered. Across the solar system, human ships that had been disguised as civilian transports suddenly activated their military systems. The plan was simple but radical. Instead of running from the scouts, they would capture them. Every alien species in galactic history had fled from Keth Mori scouts. None had ever tried to fight back. The scout ship continued its leisurely approach toward Mars, completely unaware that it was being surrounded. The Keth Mori had been hunting for so long that the concept of an ambush from prey seemed impossible to them. "All units in position," reported Captain Chen from the Endurance. Her ship was hidden behind one of Mars' moons along with 12 other vessels. "Target is entering the trap zone." The Keth Mori scout ship suddenly accelerated, apparently detecting the human ships. But instead of retreating, it moved toward them with aggressive intent. These predators had never learned to fear anything. "They're charging us," Chen observed with dark humor. "They actually think this is going to be easy." The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. The Keth Mori ship was powerful, its crystalline hull absorbing and redirecting most of the energy weapons fired at it. But Dr. Vasquez had discovered something important about their biology. They could not absorb kinetic energy as efficiently as directed energy. Human ships opened fire with old-fashioned projectile weapons, railguns firing depleted uranium, slugs at incredible velocities. The Keth Mori ship's shields flared and buckled under the primitive but effective assault. "Target is disabled," Chen reported. "Hull breaches on multiple decks. They're venting atmosphere." "Boarding teams, go," Torres ordered. Marine Commander Jake Morrison led the assault team onto the alien vessel. His soldiers wore specially designed armor that Dr. Vasquez had developed, based on her study of Keth Mori feeding methods. The suits blocked the fear-inducing psychic emanations that made the crystalline beings so terrifying. The interior of the ship was like something from a nightmare. Crystalline walls pulsed with strange energy, and the air itself seemed to whisper with barely audible voices. Morrison's men advanced carefully, their weapons ready. They found the crew in the central command chamber, 3 Keth Mori, each one over 3 meters tall and covered in razor-sharp crystal formations. The beings turned toward the humans with what might have been surprise. "Impossible," one of them said in a voice like breaking glass. "Prey does not hunt." "Guess again," Morrison replied, raising his weapon. The battle in the ship's corridors was brief but vicious. The Keth Mori were incredibly dangerous in close combat, their crystal claws capable of cutting through steel. But they had never faced opponents who were not paralyzed by fear. Morrison's Marines fought with a cold efficiency that seemed to confuse the ancient predators. When the fighting ended, 2 Keth-Mori were dead, and 1 was captured alive. The survivor, a creature that introduced itself as Vexthul the Eternal, was transported to a specially constructed prison facility on Earth. "This changes nothing," Vexthul declared during his first interrogation. "You have captured 1 scout. The hunt fleet will arrive soon, and then you will understand true terror." Dr. Vasquez studied the prisoner with clinical interest. "How many ships in a hunt fleet?" "Hundreds. Thousands if necessary. We will pursue you across the galaxy if needed. No prey escapes the hunt." "You keep using that word, prey," Vasquez noted. "It's interesting. In most ecosystems, predators and prey are clearly defined, but sometimes predators become prey themselves." Vexthul's crystalline eyes flared with anger. "We are eternal. We have hunted since before your species learned to make fire. You are nothing but food." "Perhaps," Vasquez agreed. "But food that fights back is called something different." The real test came 2 months later. Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature approaching from the outer system. The Keth-Mori hunt fleet, arriving exactly as predicted. Intelligence gathered from Vexthul suggested the fleet contained over 200 ships and approximately 50,000 hunters. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported to Admiral Torres, "the fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies. It's the standard hunt announcement." The message that played across every human communication system was simple and terrifying. "The hunt begins. You have 1 solar cycle to scatter. Those who run provide better sport than those who hide." Torres activated the solar system's emergency broadcast network. His voice reached every human settlement from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt. "This is Admiral Torres, Earth Defense Command. The enemy has arrived. All civilian populations are to evacuate to prepared shelters immediately. All military units are to assume combat positions. We will not run. We will not hide. We will fight." On Mars, Colonial Administrator Dr. James Wright began the evacuation of New Shanghai, the planet's largest city. But as the civilians loaded onto transport ships, a different kind of preparation was taking place in the industrial districts. Hidden factories had been working around the clock for months, producing weapons based on captured Keth-Mori technology. "Sir," reported Chief Engineer Martinez, "the new kinetic artillery batteries are online. 24 railgun positions, each one capable of punching through crystalline armor." Wright nodded. Mars was supposed to be an easy target, a lightly defended colony world that would demonstrate Keth-Mori power and send the human population fleeing in terror. Instead, it had become the most heavily fortified position in the solar system. The first Keth-Mori attack came exactly as their patterns predicted. A dozen ships approached Mars, moving slowly to allow fear to build among the defenders. They expected to find panicked colonists and token military resistance. Instead, they found Jake Morrison's 3rd Marine Regiment, dug in and waiting. "Contact," reported Sergeant Williams from Observation Post Alpha. 12 crystalline ships approaching from the northwest. They're not even bothering to use evasive maneuvers." "Copy that," Morrison replied. "All units, remember. These things have been hunting scared prey for thousands of years. They don't know how to fight soldiers. Make them learn." The Keth-Mori ships descended toward the planet's surface, their hulls glowing with absorbed starlight. They moved with the casual confidence of apex predators approaching helpless victims. The first ship landed near the outskirts of New Shanghai, its crystalline occupants emerging with ceremonial slowness. They never saw the artillery strike coming. The railgun slug hit the ship at 12 kilometers per second, punching completely through its hull and continuing into the ground beneath. The explosion that followed lit up the Martian sky like a second sun. "Target destroyed," reported Martinez with professional calm. 11 contacts remaining. The other Keth-Mori ships suddenly accelerated, apparently realizing that this hunt was going to be different from all the others. But by then, human fighters were rising from hidden positions all across the planet. The battle for Mars had begun, and for the first time in galactic history, the hunters were the ones being hunted. "All units," Morrison broadcast as enemy ships streaked overhead. "Remember what we learned from the prisoner. They feed on fear, but they've never tasted their own. Let's give them something to be afraid of." The war that would reshape the galaxy had begun with a simple reversal. Predators discovering what it felt like to be prey. 6 months into the war, the Keth-Mori Empire was experiencing something they had never encountered in their millions of years of existence: uncertainty. High Predator Kexmore stood in the crystalline command chamber of his flagship, watching tactical displays that made no sense according to everything his species knew about hunting. "Explain this to me again," he demanded, his voice causing the crystal walls to vibrate with harmonics of frustration. Hunt leader Nexfool, one of his most experienced commanders, gestured toward the holographic display showing the human solar system. The prey refuses to scatter, High Predator. Instead of fleeing to multiple systems as all previous prey has done, they have consolidated their forces and are actively hunting our scouts. Impossible. Prey does not hunt. Perhaps, High Predator, we need to reconsider our classification of this species. Kexmore's crystalline form flared with anger. They are prey because we have declared them to be prey. The hunt has been announced. The patterns cannot change. But the patterns were changing whether the Kethmori accepted it or not. Colonel Ana Reyes crouched in the asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter, watching through her ship's sensors as another Kethmori patrol approached what they thought was a fleeing human transport. The transport was real enough, but it was bait in a trap that had been months in the making. "Contact established," reported her tactical officer. 3 Kethmori pursuit ships closing on the transport. They're following standard hunting protocol. Slow approach to maximize terror in their prey. "Perfect," Reyes replied. "Execute Phantom Protocol on my mark." The fleeing transport suddenly accelerated, leading the Kethmori ships deeper into the asteroid field. The hunters followed eagerly, anticipating an easy kill. They were so focused on their prey that they failed to notice the human ships hiding among the asteroids, powered down and invisible to their sensors. "Mark," Reyes ordered. 12 human ships activated simultaneously, surrounding the Kethmori patrol. The hunters found themselves trapped in a sphere of hostile fire, with nowhere to run and no understanding of how prey could have become predators. The battle was over in minutes. 2 Kethmori ships were destroyed outright, and the third was disabled and boarded. Colonel Reyes personally led the boarding team, her armor protecting her from the psychic emanations that had paralyzed so many other species. She found the surviving Kethmori commander in his private chambers, surrounded by trophies from 1,000 hunts, crystallized fear from dozens of extinct civilizations. The creature looked up at her with something that might have been respect. "You fight like predators," he observed. "We are predators," Reyes replied. "You just made the mistake of thinking we were prey." Meanwhile, on the far side of the solar system, Special Forces operative David Kim was executing an even more ambitious mission. Using a captured Kethmori ship and stolen identification codes, he had infiltrated one of their supply convoys. His team of 20 soldiers was now deep in enemy territory, gathering intelligence and striking at targets the hunters never expected to be vulnerable. "This is incredible," whispered Sergeant Chen as they moved through the corridors of a Kethmori command ship. "They don't have any internal security. No guards, no checkpoints, nothing. Why would they?" Kim replied. "These things have been apex predators for so long, they can't imagine anyone being stupid enough to attack them directly." They reached the ship's central data core without encountering any resistance. The Kethmori crew was completely focused on their hunting displays, tracking human movements throughout the solar system and planning their next attacks. None of them considered the possibility that humans might be hunting them. Kim's team planted their charges and prepared to withdraw, but the intelligence they had gathered was too valuable to ignore. The Kethmori were planning a massive assault on Earth itself, over 100 ships converging on humanity's homeworld to end the hunt, with a decisive demonstration of power. "Sir," Chen reported, "the data indicates they're going to attack Earth in 3 weeks. Everything they have all at once." Kim smiled grimly. "Perfect. Let's make sure Admiral Torres gets this information. And then let's give these hunters a taste of their own medicine." Before they left the ship, Kim's team did something no species in galactic history had ever done. They left a message for the Kethmori to find. Using their own crystalline writing system, they carved words into the command chamber walls. The hunted have become the hunters. When the Kethmori discovered the sabotage, the psychological impact was devastating. For the first time in their existence, they realized they were vulnerable. The feeling of being stalked, of being watched by hostile eyes, began to eat away at their confidence. Dr. Vasquez observed this phenomenon with clinical fascination from her laboratory on Earth. The captured Kethmori prisoner, Vexthal, was showing signs of stress that his species had never experienced before. "You're afraid," she noted during one of their sessions. "Impossible. We do not experience fear. We are the source of fear. Your crystalline structure is showing microfractures consistent with psychological stress. Your energy absorption rate has decreased by 30% over the past month. You're experiencing something your species has never felt before, the knowledge that you are being hunted." Vexthal's form flickered with unstable energy. "This cannot be. We are eternal. We are inevitable." "You were inevitable when you only hunted prey," Vasquez corrected. "But you've never faced a species that hunts back. Tell me, in all your millions of years of hunting, have you ever developed tactics for fighting an enemy that wants to kill you rather than simply escape from you?" The alien's silence was answer enough. Across the galaxy, other species were beginning to take notice of humanity's impossible resistance. The Threnody Collective, survivors of a Kethmori hunt from 3 centuries ago, sent a secret diplomatic mission to Earth. Ambassador Krillnax arrived under cover of a commercial transport, carrying an offer that no species had ever dared to make. "We want to help you fight them," he told President Williams during a classified meeting. "For 300 years we have hidden in the Outer Rim, building our strength and waiting for a chance to strike back at our hunters. We never believed such a chance would come. What can you offer us?" Williams asked. "Ships, weapons, knowledge of Kethmori weaknesses that you have not yet discovered, and most importantly, proof that you are not alone in this fight." Similar messages arrived from a dozen other survivor species, the remnants of civilizations that had escaped extinction by hiding in the dark spaces between stars. All of them wanted the same thing: revenge against the hunters who had destroyed their worlds. But it was the message from the Galactic Accord that truly showed how much things had changed. The ancient peacekeeping organization, which had counseled submission to Kethmori hunts for thousands of years, sent an unprecedented communication to Earth. "Humanity has achieved something we believed to be impossible," the message stated. "You have made the Kethmori afraid. Whatever happens next, the galaxy will never be the same." Admiral Torres read the message from his command center on Luna Base, watching as reports flooded in from across the solar system. Human ships were engaging Kethmori patrols on a dozen different fronts. More importantly, they were winning. "Sir," reported Captain Chen from the bridge of the Endurance, "long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in the outer system. It looks like the entire Kethmori fleet is converging on Earth." Torres nodded. They had known this moment would come. The hunters, faced with prey that refused to run, were finally committing everything to a single decisive battle. "Signal all units," he ordered. "Operation Predator is now in effect. It's time to show these ancient monsters what humans do to things that threaten our home." The final hunt was about to begin, but this time, the Kethmori would discover what it felt like to be the ones being hunted. High Predator Kexmore had never experienced doubt before. As his massive fleet approached the human homeworld, he found himself questioning decisions that should have been automatic. The prey was not behaving according to any pattern his species had ever encountered. "Status. Report," he demanded as his flagship entered the outer edges of the human solar system. "All hunt fleets are in position." "High Predator," reported his tactical coordinator. 1,500 ships, 300,000 hunters. The humans cannot possibly resist such overwhelming force." But Kexmore was no longer certain about what humans could or could not do. In the past 6 months, they had destroyed over 50 Kethmori ships and captured dozens of hunters. They had infiltrated Kethmori space, sabotaged supply lines, and worst of all, they had made his people afraid. "Begin the final approach," he ordered. "All ships are to converge on the 3rd planet. We will end this hunt decisively." On Earth, Admiral Torres stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history approached his world. Every human military asset in the solar system was now moving toward Earth, not to defend it, but to participate in the most audacious trap in human history. "Sir," reported Commander Park, "all Allied ships are in position. The Threnody, the Veltar survivors, and 6 other species have committed their remaining forces to the battle." Torres nodded. The alliance that humanity had built in just 6 months would have been impossible under normal circumstances. But the Kethmori had united their former victims in a way that millions of years of peaceful diplomacy had never achieved. "What's our total force strength?" he asked. 2,000 human ships plus approximately 300 Allied vessels, Park replied. We're actually outnumbered for the first time in this war. Good, Torres said grimly. If this was going to be easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. The first phase of the battle began as the Kethmori fleet entered Earth's orbital space. The hunters expected to find a desperate defense around humanity's homeworld. Instead, they found what appeared to be a token force of human ships, badly outnumbered and retreating toward the planet. They flee at last, Kexmore observed with satisfaction. Perhaps they have finally learned their place in the natural order. But Captain Sarah Chen, commanding the lead human squadron, was not fleeing. She was leading the Kethmori fleet exactly where humanity wanted them, into the gravity well of Earth itself, where escape would be difficult and maneuverability limited. All units, once she broadcast on the secure channel, begin Phase 2 on my mark. Remember, we only get one chance at this. Hidden throughout Earth's orbital space, disguised as space debris and derelict satellites, were hundreds of human weapons platforms. They had been placed over the past months, powered down and invisible to Kethmori sensors. Now, as the enemy fleet pursued Chen's ships toward Earth, they suddenly activated. The trap was perfect. The Kethmori found themselves surrounded by hostile fire from all directions, trapped in a sphere of destruction that had been months in the making. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they could not maneuver effectively. Impossible, Kexmore roared as his ships began exploding around him. Prey does not set traps for predators. But humanity was just getting started. From hidden bases on Luna, Mars, and the asteroid belt, the real human fleet emerged. 2,000 ships that had been waiting in silence, their crews trained specifically for this moment. They fell on the confused and disoriented Kethmori like wolves attacking a herd of sheep. The battle raged for 18 hours. Ships exploded like dying stars throughout Earth's orbital space. The Kethmori fought with the desperation of beings who had never faced a real threat before, while the humans fought with the cold efficiency of predators who had studied their prey extensively. Dr. Vasquez watched the battle from Earth's surface, monitoring the psychological state of the captured Kethmori prisoner. Vexthul was curled in a corner of his cell, his crystalline form flickering with unstable energy patterns. "Your fleet is losing," she informed him. "This cannot be," Vexthul whispered. "We are the hunters. You are the prey." "No," Vasquez replied. "You were hunters when you only faced prey. But you made a critical error in your understanding of Earth's ecology. Humans aren't prey animals. We're apex predators who learned to hunt in packs, and now we're hunting you." The tide of battle turned decisively when Admiral Torres committed the human reserves. Fresh ships, crewed by volunteers from across the solar system, joined the fight with weapons specifically designed to exploit Kethmori weaknesses. The ancient hunters found themselves facing tactics they had never encountered: coordinated pack hunting, ambush predation, and worst of all, psychological warfare. Colonel Reyes led a boarding assault on Kexmore's flagship, her Marines fighting their way through corridors that had never been designed for defense. The Kethmori were individually powerful, but they had no experience with close-quarters combat against opponents who were not paralyzed by fear. She found the High Predator in his command chamber, surrounded by the shattered remains of his tactical displays. The ancient being looked up at her with something that might have been curiosity. "You have destroyed us," he observed. "But why? What do you gain from this violence? We offered you the honor of being hunted by the greatest predators in the galaxy." "We don't consider being hunted an honor," Reyes replied. "We consider it a threat. And humans have a simple response to threats, which is, we eliminate them." Kexmore's crystalline form began to crack as the psychological stress of defeat overwhelmed his alien physiology. "What manner of prey becomes the predator?" he whispered. "We were never prey," Reyes told him as his life force faded away. "You just didn't know you were hunting predators." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Kethmori fleet. Of the 1,500 ships that had approached Earth, fewer than 50 escaped into deep space. The hunters who had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years were broken, scattered, and most importantly, afraid. In the aftermath, President Williams addressed the assembled representatives of 47 different species, the largest gathering of alien civilizations in galactic history. "The Kethmori threat is ended," she announced, "but we will not make the mistake of assuming it can never return. We propose the formation of a new alliance, not for conquest or expansion, but for mutual defense. No species should ever again face extinction alone. Ambassador Krillnex of the Threnody Collective was the first to respond. The Galactic Defense Coalition, he said, an alliance of former prey, united to ensure that predators never again threaten the innocent. Dr. Vasquez was given the task of determining what to do with the surviving Kethmori. Many wanted them completely exterminated, but she argued for a different approach. They're not inherently evil, she explained to the Coalition Council. They're apex predators who never learned that there could be other apex predators. We can teach them to coexist, or we can exile them to the galactic rim, but genocide makes us no better than they were. The decision was made to offer the remaining Kethmori a choice: integration into galactic society under strict oversight, or exile to uninhabited regions of space. Most chose integration, finding that cooperation provided better sustenance than their old hunting lifestyle ever had. 5 years later, Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Horizons, watching as human and alien crews worked together to establish a new colony on the rim of known space. The galaxy was a different place now, one where the strong protected the weak instead of preying upon them. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, now a commander in his own right, "we're receiving a transmission from the Andromeda Project. The deep space probes have detected signs of a new threat emerging from the galactic core." Chen smiled. "Patch me through to Earth Command. Let's see what Admiral Torres thinks about our next challenge." "Ma'am?" Rodriguez asked. "Aren't you concerned?" "I mean, we just finished dealing with one galactic threat." "Commander," Chen replied, "we're humans. When we see a threat, we don't run from it or hide from it. We study it, we understand it, and then we hunt it down. That's what makes us who we are." She turned back to the stars where new challenges and new adventures waited. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They were not prey to be hunted. They were predators to be respected, allies to be treasured, and protectors to be grateful for. The universe had enough prey. It was time for more predators.